That you can jail revolutionaries, but you can't jail a revolution.
November 1861. Union soldiers land on a remote sea island expecting a fierce battle. Instead, they stepped into silence. They walked through sprawling plantations and found thousands of people. But there were no masters, no overseers, no government. The enslavers had fled, leaving behind an entire society to decide what freedom would look like. The United States had no blueprint. Nobody knew whether this would become one of America's greatest successes or one of its greatest failures. But the people waiting on those islands already knew something that the rest of America didn't. This is the story of the Port Royal experiment and the Gullah Geechee Nation. Welcome back to the Underground Syllabus. Slavery predates the world's earliest civilizations. Long before the pyramids, long before the Roman Empire, human beings had already begun enslaving one another. In the ancient world, slavery usually followed war. Conquered people became property. Others were enslaved because of debt, piracy, or raids. Nearly every major civilization practiced some form of slavery. Mesopotamia, Egypt, Greece, Rome. Kingdoms throughout Africa. Empires across Asia. The institution itself wasn't new. Even my own people, the Comanche, took and kept captives. But beginning in the 15th century, something changed. As European kingdoms searched for wealth and new trade routes, they began building a global commercial empire. Sugar plantations demanded enormous amounts of labor. The answer became the buying and selling and the transportation of millions of African men, women, and children. A machine that stretched across 3 continents. Human beings became cargo. Insurance policies. Investments. The Atlantic Ocean became the highway of the largest forced migration in human history. But those forced abroad carried more than chains. They carried languages, music, faith, stories, agricultural knowledge passed down for generations. And on a chain of isolated islands off the coast of South Carolina and Georgia, those traditions would survive. There, a new culture began to take shape. The Gullah Geechee. White planters called it Carolina gold. Not metal pulled from the earth, but a grain. Rice. It made the low country planters some of the richest people in British North America, and later, the United States. But Europeans lacked the specialized knowledge needed to grow rice in the tidal wetlands of the Carolina Low Country. The seed rotted. The tides washed away the fields. They lacked the knowledge to master the landscape. So the machine looked across the Atlantic, to the windward coast, to Sierra Leone, to Senegambia, where for centuries farmers had mastered the wetlands. They understood the tides. They knew how to build dikes, floodgates, and trunks. They knew how to transform malaria-ridden swamps into fertile fields. The human cargo was no longer random. It was targeted. Planters didn't just buy labor. They bought expertise. They bought engineering. And they bought centuries of agricultural knowledge. November 1861. The Civil War had barely begun. Union warships gathered off the South Carolina coast. Their target? Port Royal Sound. The Confederates knew they couldn't stop them. When the Union fleet attacked, the plantation owners made a decision. They fled. By carriage, by horseback, by boat. They packed what they could carry and abandoned everything else. Their homes, their plantations, their cotton, Most importantly, the people that they claimed to own. The enslaved gave it a name, the Great Skedaddle. Almost overnight, thousands of enslavers disappeared from the Sea Islands. No Emancipation Proclamation, no peace treaty, just gone. For the first time, entire communities found themselves living without masters. They were free in practice before they were free in law. No one knew what would happen next. Not the Union Army, not the federal government, not even President Lincoln. An unprecedented question now faced the United States. What do you do with thousands of newly freed people and hundreds of abandoned plantations? The answer would become known as the Port Royal experiment. The Union Army arrives. General Thomas W. Sherman steps ashore. He does not find an enemy army. He finds thousands of hungry, expectant faces. People looking for answers. People looking for protection. But the Union Army did not come to liberate them. It came to win a war. By law, the enslaved were still property. By law, they should have been returned to their owners. But months earlier, a Union general had found a legal loophole. If enslaved people were being used to support the Confederate war effort, they could be confiscated as contraband of war, enemy property seized by the military. It was a cold, dehumanizing term, but it meant one thing: they would not be sent back. The Sea Islands quickly became a massive refugee camp. Thousands of people needed food, shelter, medical care. Disease spread. Supplies ran short. The federal government realized it could not simply occupy abandoned plantations. It had inherited an entire society. There was no government agency for this. No handbook, no precedent. For the first time in American history, the United States had to answer a question it never faced before. What happens when thousands of formerly enslaved people become free all at once? Washington sent out a call. Teachers, ministers, doctors, farmers, administrators. Men and women willing to help build something that had never existed before. Many of them came south believing they were going to save the South. They had no idea how much the South was about to change them. History remembers them as Gideon's Band. The experiment began to work. Schools opened, churches filled, families reunited. People who had once been bought and sold now earned wages for their labor. For many, it was the first time in their lives that they could decide where they worked. But one question overshadowed all the others. Who would own the land? For generations, the Sea Islands had been built by enslaved hands. They cleared the forests, built the dikes, dug the channels, raised the rice, and picked the cotton. Now many believed the abandoned plantations should belong to the people who created their wealth. Some Union officials agreed. Portions of confiscated land were leased, and in some cases, sold to formerly enslaved families. For the first time, some Gullah Geechee families became landowners. It seemed the old plantation system might truly be over. Then, the war ended. President Abraham Lincoln was dead, and his successor, President Andrew Johnson, offered broad pardons to many former Confederates. One by one, former plantation owners returned. Many reclaimed the land that had been abandoned during the Great Skedaddle. Families who believed they had finally found permanence once again faced uncertainty. Not everyone lost their land. Some Gullah Geechee families managed to purchase property and held on to it for generations. But for many others, the promise of widespread black land ownership slipped away. The dream of 40 acres and a mule became one of the greatest broken promises in American history. Even so, the experiment had already proven something remarkable. Freedom was not chaos. Given the opportunity, formerly enslaved people built schools, built churches, built businesses, built communities. They had done exactly what many had claimed they never could. The Port Royal experiment became something the United States had never seen before. Not simply the end of slavery, but the beginning of freedom. Schools opened across the Sea Islands. Children who had been forbidden to learn filled classrooms. Adults came after long days in the fields. Many learned to read by candlelight. Churches became more than places of worship. They became community centers, meeting halls, schools, places where people could finally gather without asking permission. Marriages that had existed only in the eyes of families were now recognized by law. Parents searched for children who had been sold away years before. Husbands searched for wives. Brothers searched for sisters. Some found each other. Many never did. Others chose to stay, serving in the United States colored troops, fighting not only for their own freedom, but for millions still enslaved across the South. The people of the Sea Islands were proving something. Day by day, freedom did not bring chaos. It brought families, communities, schools, churches, businesses, and hope. The Port Royal experiment did not solve every problem. Many families lost land when former plantation owners returned. Reconstruction itself would eventually be overthrown. Jim Crow would replace slavery with a different system of oppression. But the experiment had already changed American history. It proved that formerly enslaved people could build thriving communities, govern themselves, educate their children, and shape their own future. The lessons learned on the Sea Islands helped shape Reconstruction throughout the South, and the Gullah Geechee people endured. Today, the Gullah Geechee people are still here. Their language survived. Their traditions survived. Their music, their food, their stories, their culture. Institutions like the Penn Center continue preserving that legacy. Not only by protecting Gullah Geechee history, but by helping families research, recover, and reclaim ancestral land that was lost through generations of legal disputes, partition sales, and fraud. The story of the Gullah Geechee Nation is not just a story about the past. It's still being written. Their language survived, their traditions survived, their music, their food, their stories, their culture. Today, more than 160 years later, their descendants still live along the coasts of South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, and North Carolina. The story of the Gullah Geechee Nation is not just a story about slavery. It's a story about survival, about resilience, about culture, about people who refused to let history erase them. When Union soldiers landed on those sea islands, they expected to find a battlefield. Instead, they found a people already imagining freedom. The Port Royal experiment did not create that dream. It simply gave the dream room to grow. Thanks for watching. I really enjoyed researching this video, especially visiting and touring the Penn Center. If you learned anything, drop a like and share so stories like this don't remain underground. Also, go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It just takes a second, but it goes a long way towards helping me get these stories out. Before we go, I got a question. What happens when the Ku Klux Klan picks the wrong town? Next time we're heading to Robeson, North Carolina. The Klan came expecting a rally. The Lumbee were waiting. It didn't go the way they planned. See you next week. I'm David Whitehead, and this has been the Underground Syllabus.